you have to understand we are not an aggressive by nature law enforcement. We carry many hats with us, and one of those is a humanitarian hat. And as I seen an individual attempting to come across, we were kind of posturing and just watching, so like, is almost like a deterrence. I'm here, so don't even try it. But the gentleman took a misstep and he starts to drown. Well, it's my duty to do my best to try and save this individual. I'm not asking myself whether they are a drug smuggler or a cartel member or anything. Just more so it's human life. And my job as a Border Patrol agent, I can't stand here and just watch. So I took my gun belt off, handed it to my partner. I took my pants off. I got all the way down to just my boxers and my shirt, and I jumped in. I got about 5 feet from the individual, and we both got washed up on a shallow spot, which saved his life. And, we stood up, we looked at each other. At that point, he wasn't breaking the law. He never crossed the river. And so we're kind of in neutral territory, and we looked at each other, and he was grateful that I made the attempt. And I turned around and went back.
Welcome to Heroes Behind Headlines. I'm your host, Ralph Pizzulo. Today's guest is former Army Ranger, actor, producer, writer, podcaster, motivational speaker, and star of the hit television series Mayans M.C., which celebrated its 5th and final season on FX this summer. Vince, who served in Iraq and Afghanistan with the U.S. Army's 75th Ranger Unit, is here to talk about his new book, Borderline: Defending the Homefront. After leaving the Army in 2007, Vince began the comprehensive training to become a Border Patrol agent. As the grandson of a Mexican-American immigrant and family man, Vince's perspective on our border crisis is unique. He understands the challenges of protecting the 2,000 miles of our border, as well as the enticement of opportunity that compels immigrants to enter our country illegally. He's with us today to look past the media myths that often vilify the brave men and women whose essential job is to protect our border, and discuss the realities they face on a daily basis, which include drug cartels, coyotes, sex trafficking, and underfunding. It's my great honor to welcome the multi-talented Vincent Vargas as today's hero behind the headlines.
Heroes Behind Headlines with Ralph Pizzulo.
So let's just start with your background. I know you were a Ranger. You had a friend who suggested Border Patrol. Can you tell us how that all came down?
Yeah, I was in 2nd of the 75th Ranger Regiment. I was on my first deployment. And after one of the missions, we were back in the room and we were kind of cleaning our weapons and just kind of conversation. Everyone's talking about what potentially will they do after they get out of the military. My father's a LA City firefighter, and so I kind of assumed maybe I'd go that route. I thought maybe a smoke jumper, since I'll be adding the Army Ranger side of my training to firefighting, and it'd be kind of exciting.
Yeah.
As everyone's mentioning it, my squad leader at the time, he said Border Patrol.
Yeah.
And he's a big Hispanic kid from Bakersfield, California, and it kind of like threw me off for a second. I was like, Border Patrol, man, I didn't know that was like something people wanted. I drove by them as a kid going to Rosarito and Ensenada. I didn't think anything of it. There wasn't an educated response to that. I just was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then we asked, like, why Border Patrol? And he explained to me some of the special operations teams that the Border Patrol had.
Yeah.
And kind of their duties. And that was the first time I ever thought, like, maybe I'll look into that.
Yeah.
And that was really the first thing that sparked it. Later on, unfortunately, he was killed in combat in 2 deployments later.
Mm-hmm.
And it still was in my head about the Border Patrol when I got out. So I got out in 2007, and I was trying to determine what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I started working in private prison as a prison guard for a while, and immediately knew that that wasn't the career field I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I started doing firefighting, just trying to follow my father's footsteps. And I fought a fire and again was like, no, this doesn't do it for me.
Yeah.
So I applied for the Border Patrol. And I was very fortunate enough to get through the process and get hired on.
From the book, it sounds like you were surprised at how like vigorous the training was. Like, you thought like as a Ranger, I've got this. And actually like, this is a serious organization with high standards and training.
Absolutely. I've never been to anything other than the military to kind of, and I thought the military was, top notch, but going into the Border Patrol and how they ran their academy, it was very almost, they call it almost like paramilitary environment. It actually was.
Yeah.
The instructors were top notch. The instructors, the educators were top notch. The establishment was top notch. Everything about it was like, man, this is a serious organization. And, I started to really believe in the agency and its professionalism. And that was just the beginning.
People have very misconceived ideas about what Border Patrol is and what their role is.
And what's happened is because it's such a confusing space, right? The immigration space as a whole and who are the enforcers of immigration.
Right.
The media themselves will call Border Patrol border control, which that name is completely irrelevant in our world.
Yeah.
But it just proves the confusion of what's going on and who does what.
Yeah.
Border Patrol agents themselves, our main mission is to apprehend any individuals who are entering the country illegally outside of a port of entry. On top of that, what we do is a humanitarian mission. We safeguard human life.
Yeah.
We do our best to save lives who enter illegally and put themselves at risk.
Yeah.
On top of that, the other mission is Homeland Security. We protect our nation. After 9/11, the implementation of Homeland Security came into effect. And so it is a multiple layers of jobs that the Border Patrol does.
Yeah.
But what the Border Patrol does after that is process the individuals according to their status, whatever they determine. Say, if they say, I'm here because I'm seeking asylum, okay, it's not for a Border Patrol agent to make that determination. All we do is process the paperwork and hand them off to ICE.
Right.
And ICE decides at that point how they're going to house them until they can get to an immigration judge who determines their case.
Yeah.
And so somehow just the lack of information, the lack of understanding, everybody wants to blame the Border Patrol for everything they see, all the chaos in immigration. And it has nothing to do with that. Border Patrol themselves are no different than the sheriff, and the sheriff himself doesn't establish the speed limit in the state.
Right.
The state does.
Right.
As for the Border Patrol, we only follow what policies are put into place by our political officials.
Yeah, you said I thought a very illustrative thing, and that is, don't you want to know who's coming into your house?
Yeah.
And I think people, they assume there's something very nefarious going on at the border, right? And it's like, no, I mean, you have a certain function and you're just trying to do your function as efficiently and humanely as possible.
Yeah, it's, there's always two arguments that are happening at once, it seems like currently on the media, right? Those are, and it's actually created the conversation to be very divisive, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But right now, as it is, and why I wrote the book, is to try to clarify that.
Yeah.
You have some people say, open the border, it's a humanitarian mission.
Right.
Then you have others say, close the border, we don't need no more people.
Right.
And actually, the answer for it is somewhere right in the middle of both of those conversations. We are a country that thrives off of immigration. It's what we've established ourselves as United States of America.
Yeah, we're all sons and daughters of immigrants.
Everyone's an immigrant from somewhere. And then the other side of it is, but we also want to protect everyone who's in this country.
Yeah.
We have the right to protect our own.
Sure.
And the biggest threats currently right now are coming through the south, the southern border.
Yeah.
And so how do you make both of those arguments and make it fair?
Yeah.
It comes down to, it's almost like a dial. I talk about in the book. It's like, you do too much security, well, then now we're North Korea.
Right.
Right. If you do too little security, well, now we have no country because there's no border.
Right.
So the answer is somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that, it helps satisfy both of those arguments. Good immigration policy where we allow immigration. Currently, I think it was last year, we allowed 1.5 legal immigrants legally entered into America. 1.5 million legally. They've done the process the right way.
Yeah.
They got in, whether it be through education, whether it be through marriage, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so we're a country that already consistently allows immigration.
Yeah, you point out in the book that we're one of the most immigrant-friendly countries in the world.
Absolutely.
Which is not the perception at all.
Correct. It's because the lack of information, lack of education. People just don't understand that.
Yeah.
And so just hearing that number alone, 1.5 million were allowed into this country legally. They've done the process.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And if we're doing 1.5 every year, that's pretty incredible numbers, you know?
That's amazing.
And so it just shows America hasn't changed. The optics of what the media is portraying is the most negative version of this.
Yeah.
And what we have today, hope I don't speak out of line here what I'm saying. What we have
not at all.
Is that we've almost incentivized crossing illegally. So then what is the purpose of coming legally?
Yeah.
Right. And so when you've incentivized it by accident, I would say, if not, then it's, I would call it more neglect than it is intentional.
Right.
But what you have today is it's easier to come into this country illegally because of the process that we have in place. They're still released into the country.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, well, then why enter legally if I could just do it easier in 3 days?
Yeah. And why are we incentivizing people to come in illegally? Yeah.
Right. So now that poses a threat, right? That poses to multiple different things, not just a threat to our nation's security, but also our resources.
Yeah.
Right. Our economic position.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And it's also, if you're just letting people come into the country illegally, then you really have no control or no system whereby you can monitor who's in the country.
Absolutely.
Which is all about our security, right?
Correct.
Which we were obsessed with after 9/11. Here are some facts. For fiscal year 2020, our country employed a nationwide total of 19,740 Border Patrol agents, with 16,878 of them patrolling our southern border with Mexico, where the primary challenges include drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and illegal immigration. That's roughly 20,000 Border Patrol agents protecting 2,000 miles of border. Men make up 86% of the total force. 14% are women, and the majority of Border Patrol agents are from minorities. When the Border Patrol was established in 1924, Latinos were a tiny minority. By 1989, they made up almost 36% of the agency. Now, according to 2016 data, Latinos make up a little more than 51% of Border Patrol agents, compared to 18% of the general population, which makes sense since 90% of the more than 2 million undocumented non-citizens who are apprehended each year speak only Spanish. So the book is so enlightening in terms of what Border Patrol does, some of the kinds of jobs that you do.
Yeah.
Like you have an incident early in your career where you see a group of people swimming across the Rio Grande. You see a guy drowning because you say in the book, a lot of the people who come across don't know how to swim.
Correct. We don't understand why and how bad they have it, that they're willing to risk their life coming across into America. They don't know the depths of the Rio Grande River.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
Yeah.
Their goal is to come here to America to live a better life. And for us as Border Patrol agents, it's not for me to judge them.
Right.
It's not for me to question why.
Yeah.
It's for me to do my job.
Yeah.
And empathetically, you have to understand that's the position we have to take. We are not an aggressive by nature law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
We carry many hats with us, and one of those is a humanitarian hat.
Yeah.
And as I seen an individual attempting to come across, we were kind of posturing and just watching, so like, is almost like a deterrence. I'm here, so don't even try it.
Yeah.
But the gentleman took a misstep and he starts to drown. And, I felt like it was my duty as someone who, I swim extremely well at the time. I was in great shape and I swam really well.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of confidence in my swimming that, well, it's my duty to do my best to try and save this individual.
Yeah.
And not asking myself whether they are a drug smuggler or a cartel member or anything.
Right.
Just more so it's human life. And my job as a Border Patrol agent, I can't stand here and just watch And still, people can question that choice, but that's something inside of me. I had to make the best choice at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I took my gun belt off, handed it to my partner. I took my pants off. I got all the way down to just my boxers and my shirt, and I jumped in.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got closer to the individual, we both I got about 5 feet from the individual, and we both got washed up on a shallow spot, which saved his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we stood up, we looked at each other. At that point, he wasn't breaking the law. He never crossed the river. And so we're kind of in neutral territory, and we looked at each other, and he was grateful that I made the attempt. And I turned around and went back,
Yeah.
and there was rumors spread that I saved this guy, this and that. And
Yeah.
the truth of the matter was, like, I never really saved him. I made the attempt. God had other plans and washed us up on a shallow rock.
Mm-hmm.
But that event created a ripple effect that eventually later inspired someone else to rescue other individuals, and you could read about it in the book. It's kind of a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it for any other reason. I just felt compelled to do my best to save the life.
You saw somebody in distress, and you was like, "Hey, I can help this guy."
Yeah, and my story is really just it's just one of millions of stories in the Border Patrol that happens daily of rescue and attempts to save life and to safeguard human life daily. It's what happens on the border. It's what people don't talk about.
Yeah.
It's what the news and media don't highlight.
Yeah.
Is that the Border Patrol as an organization saves more lives than any other organization in the nation, as well as stops more drugs than any other organization in the nation. And those things aren't talked about publicly. Those are the things they refuse to report about.
Yeah.
Because what sells is the negative aspect of what you want to pin on the scapegoats of Border Patrol.
How did that narrative form?
It really started heavily when they started doing the kids in cages narrative.
Oh, right.
That era of the argument, really, that's when it started.
Yeah.
They looked at someone to blame.
Yeah.
And they would use Border Patrol, I think, because it's probably more of the household identifier of immigration down on the border would be Border Patrol, or what the people who don't know call it border control.
Yeah.
They blame it on Border Patrol, but even though it's ICE facilities with ICE agents wearing blue uniforms, completely contradictory to what a Border Patrol agent wears. Border Patrol agents wear the green uniforms.
Yeah.
But you got ICE who wears blue, and there's still people don't know ICE. People don't even realize there's an ICE, and ICE's name has changed recently. I believe it's to a different term now. But point being is that the lack of education, they just jumped onto the easiest definition, and they used Border Patrol or border control to blame it on.
Yeah. Can you point out what is the difference between Border Patrol and ICE?
Well, you have 3 parts I'll identify immediately, right? So you got, if you're coming through a port of entry, that's the access points at our border from U.S. to Mexico. They have them in the northern border as well. But those ports of entry are usually manned by your customs agents, your customs and border protection.
Yeah.
That is who the blue uniform who sits there and asks for your immigration status.
Yeah.
Border Patrol will be there in assistance if it's a special case.
Yeah.
Outside of the port of entry will be the Border Patrol who mans and secures everything outside of a port of entry, left and right of that, east and west of that, of the border.
Yeah.
Include moving north about some 120 miles for checkpoints. Those are Border Patrol agents.
Yeah.
They wear the green uniforms. Their job is to interdict anyone who's entering the country illegally outside of a port of entry or trying to smuggle drugs or smuggle individuals. After apprehension of those individuals by us or customs at the port of entry, we hand off to ICE. ICE will make a determination whether they deport them or they house them for a later term of them to see an immigration judge to determine their case.
Yeah.
And so if there's a 4-tier level that I'm talking about, it goes Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol, ICE. Then you got the immigration judge who makes a determination.
And as you point out in the book, it can take 6 months before you...
Oh, it can take longer. Right now, I wrote that book before right now, the massive influx that's happening.
Yeah.
And so right now, there's some people who are getting a notice to appear. And that is a notice to appear as in a schedule to see the immigration judge up to 5 to 10 years.
Oh my God.
That's all changed since I started writing the book. I have talked to my publisher. I said, we couldn't even edit it. It was
right.
what's happening.
So for those 5 to 10 years, where are they housed? Are they left to their own kind of reconnaissance, or are they?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are released into the United States with an address that they have given to the ICE agents. That address is considered where they're going to be sponsored by, or where the house they're going to be staying. It's usually someone who's crossed illegally before them, or someone who is legally here, of a relationship of family or friends.
Yeah.
But there's a strong percentage, and I don't have the actual numbers, so I'll just say a big percentage who never make it back to court.
Mm-hmm. They just blend into society. Yeah.
So they'll be forever into our society, blended in, until if they've broken a law at some point, they could be identified at that point. But if they don't, if they work and they do whatever, they'll never be identified in this country.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right?
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
And people can take that information and choose however they want to feel about it. But
sure.
It's only fair for them to have that information.
According to USA Today, more than 2.2 million people were apprehended at the U.S.-Mexican border through August of this year, compared to 2.38 million border encounters for all of 2022. The population of unauthorized immigrants living in the U.S. has been estimated to be around 11.39 million people, and the number of unauthorized immigrants seized by the United States Border Patrol has significantly increased in the last few years. So has the number of immigrant deaths near the southwest border, 568 last year, which was the greatest number reported since 1998. The leading causes of death are drowning, dehydration, and heat exposure. While the most common country of birth for unauthorized immigrants is Mexico, the number of Mexicans entering the country illegally has been decreasing in recent years, and the number of unauthorized immigrants from nearly every other region of the world, including Central America, the Caribbean, South America, Asia, Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa, has increased. Now, another thing you talk about are the smugglers, and we hear a lot about coyotes and so on and so forth. Now, how prevalent is that?
Oh, that's an everyday occurrence. You know, what a coyote is, or what a coyote is, what they call it. Essentially, they work for cartels, right? Mm-hmm. Or they work for trafficking organizations. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
And trafficking organizations, they hire these individuals to be guides.
Yeah.
Coyotes. And they guide groups of illegals or migrants who are attempting to come into America for whatever reason, and they guide them to hopefully get to safety.
Yeah,
it all sounds good, but it's not the truth. There's a lot that happens in those moments. There's women who get raped. There's people who get murdered. There's sometimes they're used as pawns and essentially a cat and mouse game to let them get caught by the Border Patrol, to distract the Border Patrol so other things can cross left and right of that.
Yeah.
And so it's a business. It's a very successful business in their hands, but it's a business based off manipulation.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely unfair. And that's something
and totally unregulated.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah. It becomes a big problem.
Yeah. Now you talk about a case where I think it wasn't you in particular, but it was a friend of yours who found a 10-year-old girl just sort of somewhere across the border, like wandering around by herself.
Yeah, I believe she was a little younger than 10 at the time, to be honest. And her name is Leslie. And you know what happens is that's called an unaccompanied minor.
Yeah.
This is currently happening by the hundreds.
Jeez.
And what families are doing is they're getting their kids to come across and just go find a Border Patrol agent, just go right up to them and hand them a paper or have their phone number written on their sleeve of their shirt or some case. And that is like the best kind of loophole system is, what do we do with them from there?
Yeah.
If we can't identify who their family is down south, we can't just release a juvenile down south. So we're going to have to bring them into our system.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our system is completely overran. Look at the system with any kind of foster homes, or it's our resources are tapped. And if for them they believe it's a better situation for their child, then so be it. But that's what we're having to deal with, and now we're having to figure out how to manage that.
Yeah.
And that's a very scary thing. Fortunately enough, she was able to reconnect with her family here in America, and she's, we followed up with her story, and she is thriving. I believe she's graduating high school here soon, if not already, and just it worked out for the best for her.
Yeah,
that's not always the case.
Yeah. I had lunch with a Border Patrol agent. This is like 5 years ago, and he was complaining about people coming across with older people coming across with a young, like a kid who was like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
The kid didn't know what town he was from. Sometimes they didn't even remember their last name.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way they could really connect these people. And they're going like, yeah.
How can you determine that? Right. So in the military, anytime you do a mission with high valued personnel, potential terrorists, what you do is you separate them, right? You don't let them talk, and you separate them and you ask questions, you interrogate them separately. It's no different from us on the border. If someone comes across and says, these are my kids, we're like, okay, sounds good. We're going to separate you from your kids right now until we can do an investigative questioning and find out the truth. If we can determine that they're your kids for sure, well, then, okay, we'll reconnect you back as a family unit.
Yeah.
But if we can't determine that, we're not doing our jobs by making sure and safeguarding these kids from these trafficking organizations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's the number, it escapes me right now, but there's a massive amount of number that is just human trafficking.
Jeez.
And the money in that is becoming just as lucrative as any drug.
Yeah.
Which becomes a scary thing.
Yeah. And the idea that we would just let these people pass, when you put it in those terms, is totally irresponsible on our part.
Absolutely.
Like if these kids are in peril and they're being forced to do this, and they're with people that they're not even related to, we're going to just let that pass. I mean, that's absolutely inhuman.
It's an interesting conversation that people are very emotional about.
Yeah.
But we have to really remove emotion from this and understand the context of the facts.
Right.
Facts are, there are people coming to America looking for opportunity. Yes.
Yeah.
There are also people here looking to exploit those who are weaker than them.
Yeah.
And so how do we determine who's who? Well, we try and stop everybody, and we have to do it in a very investigative decision on how we process forward.
Yeah.
And if you can't see it that way, well, then you're being naive to the realities and the darkness that happens in this world.
Yeah.
There's bad people.
Oh, yeah. And especially when people are in distress, desperate, in a war situation or in a situation where there's no opportunity. They have so few opportunities where they come from that they're willing to leave everything and come to the States, come to the border. Those are always the people who are exploited because they really have no advocates.
Absolutely.
So whenever I hear about a conflict, that's one of the first things I think of, because I know that's when the exploiters sort of move in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing that you raised, which is, I think, really important, is that a lot of these traffickers, these coyotes, they sort of leave people at the border. They let them cross by themselves, and then they pick them up 10 miles later.
Yeah.
So they're kind of caught in this sort of no man's land.
Yeah.
Which you point out in the book, it's this is a really harsh desert environment.
Yeah. Del Rio sector alone lost, I believe, 257 migrants attempting to cross, whether it be drowning or by dehydration because of the weather, the heat.
Yeah.
And so that's just one sector, right?
Yeah.
And just imagine we'd be hitting somewhere way above the number 1,000 deaths per summer, if not per year, of people attempting to come across and losing their life.
Yeah.
So why is that? Well, when these coyotes bring them across, and the first sight of danger, the first sight of a border agent potentially catching them, they go back down south. They receive their money.
Yeah.
They've made the attempt.
Right.
And then they leave everyone else stranded.
Yeah.
They can only do the best they can do by walking towards a point that has been designated north.
Yeah.
And they walk.
Yeah.
And people that have never had an experience like that don't know how to manage themselves. They don't know how to manage their water. They don't know how to manage their bodies, the heat. And so some people, instead of calling for help, it's a little too late and they lose their life because of the heat.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Absolutely.
And they're probably not prepared. They probably have an image in their heads of the United States as soon as they cross the border. there's going to be people waiting for them or whatever, or
Yeah.
shopping malls or whatever, and it's not that way at all.
No, it could be, man, there's some areas you can walk for 20 hours and never find anybody. Just pure ranches and heat.
Yeah.
I was in the Del Rio sector, and that's currently right now the busiest sector in the Border Patrol. When I was there, it wasn't as busy as it is today. I was down at the Eagle Pass North Station area, and that was kind of the area of operation I worked as a young new agent. And after 2 years, I tried out for the special operations side of the Border Patrol, Bor Star, and I became a Bor Star member and eventually attached to BORTAC and did operations throughout the South Texas border, places like McAllen, Rio, La Grulla, these small little cities that we had to run operations and doing our best to disrupt, trafficking organizations. And so that's what I did for most of my time in the beginning. And eventually I laterally transferred over to SOG, Special Operations Group, as a medic. I helped develop and run several of the selection courses for the Special Operations Bor Star selection. And then I attached to BORTAC as their medic. And did a few missions with them before resigning from the Border Patrol.
Now, can you talk about Bor Star and BORTAC for a minute? Because that was something. I mean, I've been around special operations community for a long time, and I had never heard of that.
Really, I'm very glad, because that was kind of the point of is highlighting the teams that I fell in love with. I really believe that being special operations in the military, being an Army Ranger and as an infantryman, I wanted to transition into something where I can hopefully be a medic. I wanted to be a medic for the shooters because, my time in service, I wanted to kind of save lives now, right?
Sure.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Bor Star was the option. Bor Star is very similar to a Air Force PJ. We are medics that do search and rescue as well as shooters. And so we're medics that carry a rifle. Yeah. And we do a lot of different versions of rescue. I've done swift water rescues. I've done long line rescues. I've done search and rescues. I've done just regular medical interventions. And I'm considered a TAC med specialist, a tactical medicine specialist. And so Bor Star, at any point, if someone calls 911 on the border, it doesn't matter if you're a migrant or you're just a civilian. If you call 911 in the border area and we're closest to, we'll get to work. Yeah. And so that could be car accidents. That could be someone who's crossing the border and is dying of dehydration. And it could be a border agent themselves and maybe tripped on something, broken ankle. Yeah. And so we are a service to the border towns to do whatever we have to. Yeah. In the event of Robb Elementary, the unfortunate shooting that happened there, Bor Star agents were one of the first initial medical teams that arrived and started doing medical interventions to save as many lives as possible. Them attached to several other Border Patrol EMTs. And so it is a incredible asset to the border, but it's a very it's spoke about very little. Yeah. And so my goal was to highlight what they do and to gain their respect in the special operations community of what they do. It is a fascinating job. It is a rewarding job, and they're just not spoken about very often.
Yeah. As you say, I mean, they are, talk about badass, like they are badass, and they're special operators. And so the training is intense.
Yeah. That selection was, leaving, a Ranger battalion who is infamously known for being rigorous and challenging and difficult. I got into the Border Patrol thinking I wouldn't see anything nearly as challenging as that. When I went through Bor Star selection, it was an eye-opener. Yeah. I was shocked and surprised, and I was actually very honored to be a part of that legendary lineage now. Yeah. The selection was so tough, and we lost a lot of individuals, guys who were extremely just badasses, just couldn't cut it. Yeah. We did swimming, a lot of running, and a lot of challenges.
Well, the litter carry, man, that 5 minutes. I was like,
that'll break anyone.
No way. Yeah, no way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was honored, and it was an honor to be attached to BORTAC, who our BORTAC team is our SWAT team of the border. Yeah. They do high risk warrants. They do manhunts all across the nation. Yeah. The SOG team is called all over the world to do whatever they need to do to help anyone in distress.
That is, I don't think people understand that at all. I had no idea that you guys served overseas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Operations in Afghanistan, operations in Iraq, operations in South America and South Africa. So
Crazy.
yeah, all over the world. And, the Border Patrol has a heavy footprint in doing protection and medical all over the world. And most people don't know that. And it's something I think is important to highlight because people who are looking at a career that maybe changes every day and looking for some law enforcement that's a little outside of the ordinary, street beat cop, which is an incredible job itself.
Yeah.
Border Patrol has such a wealth of different areas you can be successful in this career.
Yeah. And how many members of BORTAC and BORSTAR?
Oh man, not a lot. I would say actively.
It's small, right?
Man, that's a good question. Actively in the Border Patrol currently would probably be somewhere, I would say the numbers are below the 500 mark.
Okay. And
probably both teams would be very similar. I think 500 to 700 might be active, and that's across the nation.
Yeah.
That might even be smaller than that.
Yeah.
So SOG, they might have 50 employees with several teams running.
Mm-hmm.
Same with BORTAC, and that's just SOG. Now every sector has their SOD, which is a small detachment that is there permanently, and so they are able to activate in their sector immediately in the case of any kind of event.
Right.
Things like active shooters, like what you saw with Robb Elementary. BORTAC was the ones who entered into that school and were able to eliminate the threat. Personal friends of mine, guys I've trained with, guys I've worked with. So it was hard to watch, and it was also an honor to know that the team that I've worked with, guys that I've been there with, and blood, sweat, and tears were in there doing God's work.
Yeah, definitely.
It was an honor to be able to see. Yeah, and so there's not a lot, and they're ready to deploy anywhere.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to highlight because it sort of engenders pride in the whole Border Patrol operation that.
Yes, sir.
You've got these highly skilled warriors / humanitarian workers operating all over the world. And, nobody's talking about that. And they should be. And these people's courage and the things that they do should be pointed out. The Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Unit, BORSTAR, is a specialized unit of the U.S. Border Patrol trained in emergency search and rescue and medical response. It primarily assists injured or stranded migrants who enter the United States illegally at remote desert locations. Border Patrol Tactical Unit, or BORTAC, on the other hand, is the tactical unit of Border Patrol whose mission is to respond to terrorist threats of all types anywhere in the world in order to protect our nation's homeland. Regarded as one of our country's most highly trained special operators, BORTAC teams are often used to provide tactical federal law enforcement capability across the country, helping with security for events such as the Super Bowl. They were deployed during the 1992 LA riots and the 2020 George Floyd protests in Portland, Oregon. On May 24, 2022, Border Patrol agents responded to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. While Border Patrol agents helped rescue and evacuate children, BORTAC breached the classroom and terminated the shooter. Another very interesting part of this is how you depict like these Border Patrol towns.
Yeah.
Which are, because of all the criminal activity around, there's a lot just kind of corruption in the air.
There can be, yeah. I mean, listen, the drug trafficking space is a very lucrative one.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon to find even border patrol agents who've been caught in the mix of the corruption and have taken money to smuggle drugs.
Yeah.
I when I wrote the book, I didn't mention that, and I should have, because I don't want to seem like I'm just pushing that onto anyone. I think anyone in those border towns is susceptible to the corruption because of the money that is offered.
Sure, just the money.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate, but it is a thing. It's something that we have to have in the conversation. We have to.
It is a reality. Yeah. We got to deal with it.
not uncommon to show up to a bar at night with your friends and to see on the other side of the room guys who are part of smuggling organizations.
Crazy.
Guys that there's the same girl that some people are talking to have dated one of them and also dated one of our guys, and it's this very interesting kind of diluted the waters of the border town that you can't get away from.
Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting space where you don't know who is a part of it. And almost anyone you meet in a border town is one degree of separation from someone who has either been arrested or gone to prison or involved in drug smuggling.
And it's just like a constant presence in everything.
Yeah,
the
it's
money
very fascinating. And I find these border towns gorgeous and they're beautiful and I love them. And I don't want to ever think that I'm bad mouthing them. Not at all. The food is incredible, the culture is incredible, the people are incredible, but weaved into that, it is a constant. It's just because of the nature of the location, so close to the border, so close to the conflict of drug smuggling. It's just a part of the culture there that it is an obvious conversation.
Yeah. And it was interesting for you because you're from LA and you're from a Hispanic background.
Yes, sir.
But like a lot of people who grow up here, you didn't really speak Spanish until you joined Border Patrol.
My Spanish was absolutely terrible. I was really good at ordering food, because I had time. But, my mother, who's Mexican, and my father's Puerto Rican, both spoke Spanish to each other in our household. But, us growing up in LA, my parents decided they wanted us to assimilate to the American culture a little bit better. And so we didn't speak Spanish in our house to our mothers and fathers, and we learned English, but we dabbled in Spanish. It was kind of a mixed kind of conversation. I didn't know there was a word for sandals. I called them chanclas. It was this very weird Spanglish kind of thing.
Yeah.
When I got to the border town, and I go, the first moment I went to go get a burger because I was hungry. The lady was asking me my order in Spanish, and I was like, oh. Wow, what a culture shock this is, and as well as the McDonald's, they offer you can order jalapenos on the side, which I was blown away. I was like, what? Like, that's crazy. And those are things that I took into okay, it's gonna be a little bit of a culture shock for me to really understand the city and get to know it and kind of make it home.
Yeah, make it home. I think is the key. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because it is. I lived in Mexico for a couple of years when I was a kid, and I mean, the other thing I think a lot of people don't understand is Mexican culture is amazing, man.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, incredible.
It's rooted on family. It's rooted on good food. It's rooted on good music and good drinks.
Yep.
It's community. It's beautiful. It's also a challenging position to be in, being Hispanic and being a border patrol agent.
Yeah.
There's more Hispanic border patrol agents or Latino border patrol agents and Latina border patrol agents than there is any other culture, any other race.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating because some people get so mad. There's this argument. When I talk about it in the book, people say, why would you turn your back on your people? And it's a very ignorant comment that people would give us.
Yeah.
It's like, but I live in America. And they're usually someone who lives in America asks us that same question. And I'm like, wait, you live in America, you reap the benefits of America, you seek the opportunities of America, or your family did before you, and then you're going to turn your back on that you're not American, we're American.
Right.
And maybe some of us won the lottery by being born here. Maybe some of us came here legally and got their papers naturalized, but whatever it is, I have invested back into this country. I have fallen into assimilating into the cultures of what America stands for.
Right.
And that's why I believed I'd be turning my back on my own grandmother who came here illegally to try and seek the opportunities of America if I didn't respect this country and appreciate what she's given us.
Right. And respect the idea of having rules and upholding them.
Yes, sir.
Because if we just sort of throw all the rules out, whether it's the United States or any other country, and just say, well, people can just do whatever they want, then you allow a lot of room for the bad actors to take over, right?
Yeah, those bad outliers.
And as you pointed out before, there are people who are frankly evil, and that they have no problem exploiting people and hurting children and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
And those are the people we have to protect ourselves from.
It goes back to the conversation of, do you have a front door in your house?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we deserve to have a front door in our country.
Yeah.
and we deserve to know who's knocking, and we deserve to determine whether we want them to come in or not, and we deserve to be able to determine how long we want them to stay.
Yeah.
And if you don't see it like that, well, then why do you have a front door?
Yeah. You're going to just let anybody walk in and take what they want.
So then your house is my house too? Right. That's not very fair.
I'm coming over to dinner tonight. Yeah. Yes. Currently, our southern border is so overwhelmed that most immigrants arrested aren't even being interviewed for asylum status before being released into the United States. In October of this year, 188,778 immigrants were arrested by Border Patrol for illegal entry. Of that number, only 28,334 were placed in expedited removal status, where they would have been interviewed by an asylum officer. Some 20,000 were voluntarily returned to their home country. Another 11,000 were detained by Border Patrol, and 6,000 were deported based on prior orders of deportation. But the vast majority of those arrested, 120,175, were simply released into the United States without having to speak to an asylum officer or establish any credible fear of prosecution in their home countries, according to the current catch and release policy. So you talk about the sort of the three groups, the primary groups of people who are crossing the border. Can you talk about that?
Yes.
And how how the numbers have shifted over time?
Just by the nature of the location and proximity, you have the Mexicans who determined as Mexicans. We call them Mexicans. And that's one group that comes across to attempts to come into America often.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, just based on the fact of location, right? They're closer. Why not make the attempt? The number of Mexicans coming across illegally is high, but it's not. Everyone seems to, or the uneducated tend to say, "Oh, these Mexicans." Well, it's not all Mexicans, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a percentage of Mexicans who attempt to come across every year, yes.
Yeah.
But then there's other than Mexicans, and the way that's determined is everyone outside of Mexico that is in South America, and that goes from they're called OTMs, other than Mexicans, and that's your Hondurans, your Ecuadorians, your El Salvadorians, your Venezuelans, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And those are called OTMs, and that's how it's determined. One, also the cartel is the one who labeled them originally, and we use that ourselves in the way we determine our paperwork as well. You got Mexicans, other than Mexicans, and then you have exotics. And the exotics are going to be the ones that you never really expected, something that was very exotic to us as well. Those are like your Brazilians. That's going to be your Middle Easterns, your Chinese, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And
those are starting to rise in the numbers. We're starting to see a ton of Africans, ton of Asians, and Asians more so. Chinese are starting to cross more often, and your Middle Easterns, and so those become a concern more so than anything. Yeah. Right. Like, wait, who has the money?
Yeah. Yeah. Because that costs money. Yeah.
Yeah. To travel that far.
Yeah.
Raise that question first. Like, who's paying for that tab?
Yeah.
And as well as there's countries that we have conflict with. There's countries that we know for a fact there's political issues with, and so when you have these outliers coming from those countries, it raises an eyebrow.
Yeah.
It makes me question.
Yeah.
There is people who've come across from, illegally from Middle Eastern countries that are currently at war. Right. And so, I don't say it's too often, and I'm writing something to better articulate this thought, but maybe America is turning into almost its own version of the Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As people come into this country illegally, and we can't determine who they are, we have no way of protecting ourselves.
Right.
We essentially have created our own Trojan horse within our own country. Yeah. Potentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't fearmonger. I just
but if people with bad intent know that we're vulnerable in this area, I mean, that's what they do. They look for the vulnerabilities and they take advantage of them, right?
Yeah, and someone who's, I'm highly trained. I've seen some of the worst people in all across the world, and so I always have that version of my brain on, and like, okay, it's something to be concerned about, something to think about, something to be prepared about. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And maybe there's a few outliers out there that want to come to America for the opportunities of being successful, of having a job or building a business, whatever that is. Okay, so be it.
Right.
It still doesn't sit comfortably knowing that there are millions who come across illegally that we cannot determine who they are, what and what their intentions are.
Right. And there should be a process that doesn't take 5 years to accommodate people who want to come into the country,
Yes, sir.
who want to contribute to our society. If we can identify them and interview them, and okay, this guy's a cobbler and he's got a family and he's a good guy, sure. You want to come to the United States?
Yeah.
But if you're somebody kind of sketchy and like, where did you come from? What are you here for? And you can't determine those things. I mean, we have a perfect right to say, you know what? Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
So far this year, Border Patrol agents have seized enough fentanyl to kill the entire U.S. population. In October, Border Patrol Chief Jason Owens announced that agents had seized over 2,700 pounds of fentanyl as part of the more than 69,000 pounds of narcotics seized between ports of entry. The seizures included 40,000 pounds of marijuana, 13,000 pounds of methamphetamine, and 11,000 pounds of cocaine. According to the Drug Enforcement Administration, 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal depending on a person's body size. 1 kilogram of fentanyl has the potential to kill 500,000 people. A kilogram is roughly 2.2 pounds. Meanwhile, drug deaths from fentanyl nationwide hit a new record in 2022. 109,680 people died as the fentanyl crisis continues to deepen, according to data released by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. According to the DEA, most of the fentanyl is smuggled over land across the U.S.-Mexican border. Smaller amounts are smuggled by air from China. Can you talk about like some of the drug interdiction things that you did? Because you're talking about seizing hundreds of pounds of drugs.
Thousands.
At a time. Thousands.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. You know, the times have changed slightly, obviously, because some states are now, marijuana is legal. At the time I was an agent, you know, marijuana was one of the big ones that was transported.
Mm-hmm.
Currently now it's changed to things like fentanyl, methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Cocaine is still high up there.
Yeah.
But during my time, it wasn't uncommon to apprehend thousands of pounds of marijuana that was attempting to be transported into America.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting cat and mouse game that happens. And usually it happens simultaneously with illegal immigrants coming across as well. So the trafficking organization would have a group come across illegally, and that would inundate the agents.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers, it's a numbers game. So if 50 come across, well, then now you have to manage 50 bodies. And so you have agents coming from every different way just to try to support that effort. And at the same time, boom, they're transporting 3, 4, 5,000 pounds of marijuana somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so us as a special operations team, we gathered intelligence on these things, and we were able to disrupt, as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
On a single night or a single weekend or even a month.
Yeah.
We designate different locations that had high probability for drug smuggling, and we would do our best to disrupt that during those times.
Right. And you say it's shifted. Now it's more fentanyl and methamphetamine, which are arguably even more damaging to people.
Absolutely, more dangerous and damaging. And the issue with fentanyl is hurting our American people.
Oh, horrible. Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah.
And so it is definitely a big concern, but it's also a scary thing to manage and deal with, fentanyl.
Yeah.
Doing a mission and potentially getting contaminated with fentanyl itself is just as much of a danger.
Yeah. Because just like a couple of grains of it, I understand can kill somebody.
Absolutely.
God, crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah, it's a crazy time.
Let's close with the operation up in New York State.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I don't think, people would realize that, Border Patrol would be called into, or Borstar and Bortak?
Yeah, so in 2015, I was part of the team that was activated to go apprehend the two escaped convicts, Matt and Sweats, out of the escape from Dannemora prison facility. There was a TV show on it, and
Yeah.
it really was two escaped convicts who both were in for murder, I believe, at the time. And they were able to coerce a corrections officer to help them escape.
A female corrections officer, right?
Female corrections officer, yes, sir. One of them had an appropriate relationship with her, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We just got back from a training mission with some 3-letter agencies, and we were just kind of working on some of our standard operating procedures as a team. And as we were settling in at home, boom, we get the call. The escaped convicts were potentially headed either to the southern border or the northern border. And when you hear that, and you have anyone that has to deal with tracking, you're going to call the people who track daily.
Yeah.
And that's us, Border Patrol.
And you're the best trackers.
I would put that on anything, that we are the best trackers in the nation, because of the fact that we do it daily.
Right.
There's no other job that requires tracking as much as we do.
Right. And just the old fashioned stuff of looking for things to
disturbances in the ground.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir. We're looking for sign, and that could be disturbances of any kind of terrain or feature or dirt or whatever it comes by. And we usually, in those opportunities, we get intel, and they say we saw something in this area, and then we start to work. We have our tracking dogs, we have scent dogs, we have bite dogs,
yeah,
and we have tracking dogs, and we use our dogs as well as our team's experience to do our best to track down whoever we're trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get the call, we show up, and there's every agency you can think of in the world, and we're all gathering intel. We're doing our best to run operations in the New York area. We ran several operations that came up short. We saw that they had a disturbance here. They probably laid down for the night here. They ate here.
Right.
And we were just missing them. We couldn't find them.
Yeah.
After 7 days of just dry hole after dry hole, is a term we use for like there was nothing on the objective.
Right.
I had determined that my daughter's birthday was coming up, and I would just rather be home at this moment because I've missed so many of her birthdays throughout the years of me being special operations, going on combat missions, and working with the Border Patrol as well. That I asked my supervisor if I can go home.
Yeah.
And the day I was flying home was the day they got new intel. And they were able to get a good enough intel to be able to engage on one of the individuals and killed him while he was trying to engage on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was home. And that was actually one of the first moments I realized that maybe it was time for me to resign and focus on my family, because it was part of where my heart was going in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be a medic that only gave a half-ass heart to the job.
Yeah.
I felt it was fair to my team.
Yeah.
And so I resigned. But I've been able to sit back and watch the career continue to grow, and the Bortak and Borstar team get notoriety for being successful in several other manhunts throughout the nation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And very important work they're doing. Just recently, they were the ones who apprehended the individual who escaped from prison.
Oh, wow.
That was Bortak as well. Bortak, yep.
Yeah, they don't get credit, man. They don't get the credit.
You
never even hear Bortak. I mean, in the news.
You don't hear it often.
Yeah.
You don't hear it often.
Yeah.
They're starting to use Border Patrol Special Operations. They'll say that, or Special Tactics Team.
Okay.
But you won't really get to hear the Bortak term getting thrown around, and you won't ever know that there's a Borstar agent attached to them at all times. And so they've been all over the nation. They do their jobs, and they're the quiet professionals of our nation on our own soil.
Yeah.
And it's an admirable and beautiful mission that they do.
And a tough job because, as you say, to balance that kind of intense operations all the time with raising a family is not easy.
No, sir. It is a challenge. Yeah. And it is. It's no different than being special operations in the military of
right.
the type of workload you take on and how little we are at home.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. And
yeah,
I hope this book highlights that and gives them the notoriety and the credit that they deserve.
You made a transition. You went from Border Patrol and you got into acting.
Yes, sir.
Was that something you had always dreamed of doing? Where did that come from?
I grew up in LA, and I did a couple years of college in theater while I was playing baseball. And,
oh, okay.
I definitely had a thought in my head it would be nice to do.
Yeah.
Just the way the world works, I never imagined I would actually be able to create that or manifest it. I was able to produce a movie with some friends,
mm-hmm.
and I just continued to pursue it. And one day I was able to get an audition for Mayans M.C.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to land that role and continue to pursue that. And
fantastic.
Eventually season regular on the show as well as a writer for the show.
Fantastic. Yeah, what a life you've had, man. What a life.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm excited. The book is out at some of the Nobles. Barnes & Noble released it a little early, and I'm grateful for that. But
yeah,
I think this book, I think every household should read this book. I think it's enlightening. I think it's educational. I also think it's a good morale boost for the Border Patrol to see that their voice is out there.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that, when you read this book, you realize there's just so much misinformation. And then there's just so much we don't know that is never talked about, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are like 20,000 Border Patrol agents
across the nation.
Something like that.
I think it's somewhere down to 19,000. There's been a lot of people retiring due to the fact of the negative, the negativity that they've been politicized, which is unfair, Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service. Thanks for doing this. It's really been a pleasure to meet you, and I really admire you for all that you've done.
Appreciate it, sir.
Pretty amazing.
Thank you very much.
As Vince points out, despite what is often reported in the media, the main orientation of the Border Patrol as an agency is humanitarianism and the protection of life, not violence and force. Between the years 2019 and 2022, while millions of people were apprehended and processed at the border, there were only a total of 40 shootings involving Border Patrol agents. This is the total of all incidents where an agent used their firearm in the field, not just those that resulted in a loss of life. In comparison, over that same period of time, there were over 2,100 separate incidents where a Border Patrol agent was attacked, cut, stabbed, or otherwise injured. The problems Border Patrol agents have to deal with are large and growing exponentially. Even so, as Vince states in his important new book, Borderline, and I quote, "I firmly believe the biggest threat to the Border Patrol is misinformation being spread through mainstream media and the lack of counter and correct information to take its place." We thank him for his service to our country and for explaining the real situation at our southern border and correcting misrepresentations. It's my great honor to name Vincent Vargas as today's hero behind the headlines.
Heroes Behind Headlines. Executive producer Ralph Pizzulo. Produced and engineered by Mike Dawson. Music provided by Extreme Music. For exclusive content, please join our Patreon group at patreon.com/heroesbehindheadlines.